And now we are ready to begin. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Torn Book Club on this September 6th, 2015. This is Labor Day weekend, so happy Labor Day to everybody who is celebrating it. Got some good folks in the chat today. A lot of our regulars: Eravandi, I Stole the One Ring, Light of the King, Temple. Um, uh, I Stole the One Ring is asking, are we going to have a book for this month, a book of the month? Not for September, because we're in the final stretch of the Silmarillion, and so I want to dedicate the rest of this month to that. Um, so we had a little bit of music at the start of the show, and those of you who heard it on the live chat, I'm sorry it's not in the YouTube archive. It was various bits of the Gondor theme from the Lord of the Rings, because I felt it was very appropriate, given that today's episode of the Silmarillion is going to be focusing on the precursor of Gondor, which is Numenor. So, yeah. To answer your question again, I Stole the One Ring. There won't be a book of the month for September, but there will be one for October. I've already picked it, um, and so we'll leave it there for then, and we'll discuss it in October. So let's get right into the Silmarillion, because there is a lot to cover. Um, you may have thought that last week was the end of the story, because it's a gigantic climactic battle with Morgoth. Good triumphs over evil. Morgoth is expelled into the void. What more could there be? Well, there's two big chapters worth of more in this book. Now it does end the story of the Silmarils, but there is more that begins after that, because there is several thousands of years of history beyond that. Now, I wanted to kind of start with giving you a little bit of a reference to time frame, or to give you an idea of like time frame here, because what happened last week ended the first age of Middle Earth, so we are now officially into the second age. Um, Now, the first age began with the rising of the sun and the moon, which also coincides with men awakening in Middle Earth, and Fingolfin crossing the Helcaraxa into Middle Earth. So it's a very big event. And from the beginning of the first age to the end of the first age, which we just hit, is roughly a little under 600 years. Um, and to give you a better idea of the scope of what we're getting into, what we're going to be discussing today, just in today's episode, is going to cover roughly about 3,000 years of history. There's a lot to cover, and I'm only going to do the highlights. We're not going to get into every little minute detail, because this would take forever. Um, uh, Aravani was asking, do we know how long the first stage was in years? Yeah, specifically, it was 590 years in the first stage. Um, the second age is roughly about 3,400 years, and the third age is a little over 3,000. Um, so the majority of the history of Middle Earth is yet to come. Um, but we're only going to cover the highlights, and I had to go through all of this with a very fine tooth comb. Do something that I try not to do with the Silmarillion, and that is to go off of that is to try to bring in more outside references rather than just what's in the text. But and even Tolkien himself really skips over a lot in this chapter. Um, so I went to a couple different resources to try to help fill in some various timeline and story gaps. So, so most of what I'm going to be talking about is in this chapter, and this chapter is called Akallabeth, which means the downfall of Numenor. We're not going to be getting into the downfall particularly in this episode. We're going to be covering the first half, which is the rise of Numenor from nothing into a gigantic world power. So let's go to the big board and start off there. Let me just adjust a couple of things. There we go. Our chat window is all nice and rested there now. Okay. So what we had at the beginning of, or at the end of last week was Morgoth was defeated and expelled into the void. Now comes cleanup. And, particularly with what to do now with elves and men. Now, elves were given a very simple choice. They could either stay in Middle-earth, or if they wanted, they could go back to Valinor with the Valar. A lot of them opted to go back to Valinor, but a good number also decided to stay. Some of those who stayed were Galadriel, Elrond, Círdan the Shipwright, Gil-galad, the High King. Many of the Grey Elves decided to stay. So Middle-earth wasn't completely removed, wasn't completely devoid of elves at this point, but the elf population did decrease significantly. And a lot of these elves who left Middle-earth at this point were given a new home on a special island that is just east of Valinor. Where is, if I can find it? Here it is. It's called Tol Eressëa, or the Lonely Island, the Lonely Isle. And on this island, they actually set up a new city. And this city is called Avallone. And for which I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that that's a bit of a reference to the legend of King Arthur with the island of Avalon, which is where Arthur goes after he dies. And this is where a lot of the elves establish themselves now. So that's sort of where elves are. The tougher question is what to do with men. Aravandi's saying, I don't know why, but the thought of elves leaving always makes me a little sad. Well, there's good reason for that. And it's because the elves are very closely tied to the earth. And so with them leaving Middle-earth, it's like a piece of the earth is leaving with them. And so it's a sad thing, but it's also it's part of the elves' existence. Yeah. So moving on from the elves, there is the question of men and what to do with men. Because the Valar aren't entirely sure how to handle men. And this is for two reasons. One is that the fate of men is a big mystery, even to them. Because while the Valar live on the earth and never leave and never die, elves can die, but their spirits stay on elves can die, but their spirits still stay on the earth. They stay in the halls of Mandos. When men die, however, their spirits go somewhere else, and nobody knows where. Now, Marfals and Aravandi are having a little discussion here about Morgoth. Uh, the thought of Morgoth not being completely defeated makes me a little nervous, Marfals is saying, and Aravandi says, Morgoth got tossed into the void. He can trouble Middle-earth no longer. That's actually not entirely the case. Because there is a watch that's set on the Gates of Night, which is the boundary between Ea and the Void, and it's there to keep Morgoth at bay. But it also says that he cannot trouble the earth so long as the Valar remain in power. So there is something of a caveat to Morgoth staying away for all time. But that doesn't really enter into this story, so we'll leave it at that. Um, so anyway, the question of men is what to do with them, because the Valar know that their spirits have an entirely different purpose that they're not privy to. And so they also feel that they don't really have much authority over the fates of men. And also, the majority of men either didn't join in with the fight against Morgoth or sided with Morgoth, which is how we get people like the Easterlings. And there's, of course, one major exception to that, and that's the three houses of the Edain, the houses of Hador, Haleth, and Beor, the ones who actually helped out the elves in the war against Morgoth. So the Valar really don't want to touch men. They don't really want to deal too much with them. They want to sort of leave them to their own devices. But for those who did help the elves, they do give them rewards. They grant them exceedingly long life, and they're also going to give them a special land where they can establish a new kingdom for themselves. And that land is actually an island that is raised up out of the ocean or out of the sea, and it rests between Middle-earth and Valinor. And that land is called Arnor, the land of, or sorry, no, Andor, the land of gift. Arnor is something else. It's called Andor, the land of gift. It also goes by the name Anadun and Westerness and Numenor. So, the men of the Edain, the elf friends, are allowed to come to this island and establish a new kingdom. Temple saying, and it shall be called this land. And Sauron says, I think we should call it your grave. Ah, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. Spoilers. So the men of the Edain, who now have very long life, now go by a new name, which is the Dunedain, because they are part of Anadun now. So their first king, or their leader, is Elros, who is the brother of Elrond. Now, Elros and Elrond were the children of Arendil and Elwing, and Arendil and Elwing were given a special choice to bind their lives either to elves or men. That's their choice. Arendil and Elwing decided to bind their lives to the fates of elves. And Elrond chose that as well. He chose to be an elf. Elros, however, chose to align himself with men. And so he's given a very long life, and he's also given the title of the first king of Numenor, and he's given a new title. Ustreamer1704 is saying, finally able to watch live. I've been watching on YouTube for months. Glad to be here live. Well, I'm glad to have you here, Ustreamer1704. Glad you can join us live today. So Elros is now the first king of Numenor, and he's given a new name and a new title, which is a Tar Miniatur. Now, he's the first king. All told, there are 25 kings and queens of Numenor, and before you freak out, I'm not going to go through every single one of them. We're gonna go through the highlights. I think I've got listed probably about 5 or 6 of them. And those are like the main ones. These are the main turning points in the history of Numenor. So with Elros in the lead, Tar Miniatur, the kingdom of Numenor is established, and I have a map of it for you so you can see it. This is what Numenor looks like. They establish a couple different cities. The main ones are in the center here, the capital city called Ar-Menellos. And then we have 2 port cities, one in the west here called Andunie, and one in the east called Romena. And those are the 3 major cities of Numenor. There are other cities, but these are the ones that really sort of play a role in the events we'll be discussing today. On top of that, there's a giant mountain right in the center of Numenor, and this is called the Meneltarma. Aravandi saying, I have the John Howe map of Numenor on my bedroom wall. It's pretty. I'll bet it is. I don't have that one. I've been meaning to... They're selling like these big packs of maps of Middle-earth at Barnes & Noble, and I've been wanting to pick one up just because it's so many different maps and they're all beautiful. But haven't quite done that yet. But anyway, so there's a large peak right in the center of Numenor called the Meneltarma, and this is given a very special purpose. On the Meneltarma, they establish They establish a temple to Eru, to Iluvatar, and here is where they basically worship Iluvatar, and they also have very strong relations with the Valar and with Elves, and actually let me give you a couple pictures here. This is what Ar-Menellos ends up looking like. It's a very well decked out capital city. Andunie is a lovely port city, and so is Romena. So here in let's see here. Let's go with Ar-Menellos here. So in Ar-Menellos, they begin to build themselves up and establish their kingdom, and they do this with steady help from the Valar and the Elves, and their kingdom is all about knowledge and wisdom and not about military might and strength. And the elves and the Valar help to foster this by giving them lots of gifts. Now, there are two gifts that I'm going to talk about here that will play significant roles in in the story to come. One is 7 specific stones that will later become the Palantiri. These are the Seeing Stones. These are gifts to Numenor from the elves. The elves also give them a special tree called Nimloth. Now, Nimloth is a seedling from a tree in Tol Eressëa, which I would need to look up again to find its name, because, believe it or not, I do not have an encyclopedic memory and cannot remember all of these names. Where is it? Gonna have to go to the index. Talk amongst yourselves. Nimloth, Nimloth, where are you, Nimloth? Okay. Okay, it's somewhere in there. Anyway, the tree in Tol Eressëa is a sapling that was taken from one of the great trees of Valinor, Telperion. Don't worry, I'm going to keep talking now. Later the king saying, "Oh, Josh, we know you do have an encyclopedic memory. You just don't want to let us know the real deal." That's cute. Actually, no. This was an episode that I really kind of stressed over because there's so much information crammed into this one chapter. So anyway, Nimloth is a tree that is a direct descendant of Telperion, one of the trees of Valinor. So it has very special significance. So those are the two gifts of many that the elves give men. That they give Numenor. And the Numenorians really do thrive and grow in a big way. And soon they begin to travel east back to Middle-earth. And it's through these travels east that they begin to make contact with men in Middle-earth. Now, in Middle-earth, things are kind of in a dark age. Men are scattered, they're leaderless, they're subject to many evil kings. Light of the King is asking, so is it related to the tree that Ungoliant destroyed? Yes, it is. She's talking about Nimloth. So the Numenorians begin to make contact with these men who are really sort of scattered and primitive and really terrified of the darkness that is surrounding them, because as much as the Valar was able to wipe out a lot of what Morgoth left behind, they weren't able to get rid of everything entirely. And so there are still the Easterlings, who established themselves as dark, evil kings. There's still orcs, there's still Balrogs, there's still various things in Middle-earth that are associated with Morgoth, so it's still not a very pretty place to live. The Númenorians come, and they begin to teach these men how to live. They begin to teach them farming, and they begin to teach them the establishment of life. And the men of Middle-earth really take to it, and they go and they begin to better their lives, and they start to revere the Númenorians as gods, calling them the Sea Kings because they come from the sea. And the Númenorians give them lots of gifts. They share a lot of the gifts of the Elves and the Valar with the men of Middle Earth, and sort of bring a little light into the darkness. And this lasts for a good long while. So going back to Elros, to give you an idea of his lifespan, he lived for 500 years as the rule, and he was king of Numenor for a little over 400. And his title, Tar Miniatur, gets passed down, or I should say, the title of Tar, which is an Elvish affectation for king, passes with him to his son, and so on and so forth down the line. And so we have many other kings of Numenor until we get to, I'm going to say, I think this is the 11th king of Numenor, roughly about 1,500 or so years later. Maybe a little less than that. So like I said, we skip ahead quite a bit. So Numenor has been this great influence. They've also reestablished their friendship with the Elves in Middle-earth and befriended Gil-galad, who is the High King of the Noldor, and he's established a new kingdom in an area called Lindon. And Lindon and the Elves are dealing with a very particular pest, somebody that the Valar overlooked, and his name is Sauron. Now, it should be noted that, like, at this point, Sauron is a very wily, sneaky son of a gun, because he's not only he's eluded capture by the Valar twice so far. And so after the defeat of Morgoth, he was never really involved in that battle after he was banished from his tower by Luthien. He sort of went off into a corner, partly out of shame, partly out of partly he was just he was just injured, really. So, Light of the King is asking, I missed if Josh answered the tree question because I had 2 commercials. I believe your question, Light of the King, was whether or not Nimloth was related to the trees that were destroyed by Ungoliant, and yes, it is. It's a direct descendant of the silver tree, Telperion. So anyway, Sauron has been slowly building his power and his strength up again, and he begins to reestablish his power. He begins to reestablish his kingdom, or establish a new kingdom. And he also creates a little something, a little bauble, a little trinket, called the One Ring. Now, I'm skipping over a lot of the details of this because it's covered in great detail in a later chapter, and so we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that later on. But for now, Sauron has reestablished himself. He's created the Rings of Power, or he's helped facilitate the creation of the Rings of Power, and then he's forged the One Ring that controls all of them. And Gil-galad, he's somebody who saw through Sauron's ruse right away, and they've declared war on each other. So there's a big war going on, and it looks like the elves are going to lose until until the Numenorians come along. Under the reign of I believe he's the 13th king, 11th, or is it? No. He's the 11th king of Numenor, and his name is Tar Minas Tir. And he leads a large group of Numenorians to assist Gil-galad in beating back Sauron. And they're able to push him back into Mordor, where he stays for now. But Sauron is not the kind of person who forgets or forgives something like that, because he was going to win this battle had it not been for the Numenorians. So, and as we've already seen from from previous encounters, Sauron is somebody who is okay with biding his time and making sure that plans come to fruition the way he intends them to. And so, like I said, he doesn't forget or forgive the Numenorians beating him back, and he's going to have his revenge. Light of the King is asking which they name Minas Tirith after. Actually, Tar Minas Tir is named after another tower called Minas Tirith. Actually, you know what? Tolkien never says explicitly that he's named after Minas Tirith, but I sort of assume he is. Minas Tirith was actually originally a watchtower established by Finrod back in the First Age. And the Tower of Minas Tirith that we see in Lord of the Rings is an homage to that. So that's sort of the breakdown of Minas Tirith. Whether or not Tar Minas Tir is named after it, at least I couldn't find anything that specifically says he is. But, you know, it certainly sounds like it. Eravandi is putting Thranduil's words into Sauron's mouth. 100+ years is but a blink in the life of an evil Maya. Sauron is patient. Sauron can wait. Yes, he can, and he does. So, there's a very strong bond of friendship between men and elves here. That's only strengthened more with the aid of the Numenorians helping out the Noldor. But it doesn't last forever. A couple kings later, after Tar Minas Tir, we have another king. This is the 13th king, Tar Atanamir. And he and his father are beginning to sort of question a lot of things that the Valar are doing, because while men are free to move back and forth between Numenor and Middle-earth, they can't go west to Valinor. They're banned from going to Valinor. And, you know, it's the Undying Lands, it's the home of the Valar, it's the home of the Elves. And for a good, let's say, 1,500 years or so, Numenorians are perfectly happy with this arrangement. They don't have a problem with it until Tar Atanamir and his father. Let me find him here. Tar Kiryatan. Marvels is asking, why are they called Tar? Okay, I'll wait until Marvels comes back from commercial before answering that. But essentially, Tar is I'll wait. Okay, so Tar Kiryatan and Tar Atanamir begin to question why they're not allowed to go to Valinor, and Light of the King is asking, is the history of the kings of Numenor also in the appendix of the Lord of the Rings books? I only read part of the appendices. I believe it is in there. It's been a long time since I really have thoroughly gone through the appendices of Lord of the Rings. I believe part of it is in there, but maybe not to a great extent. And I would say it's not even to a great extent here in the Silmarillion, because like we have here, we've just skipped ahead 1,500 years to the 13th king. So, at this point, Marvels is asking, but it also applies to women because I know about Tar-Miriel, which was a queen. Yes, Tar is it's a royal affectation. Can mean king or queen, because there are queens in the history of Numenor. Not just Tar-Miriel. There's also Tar. Akallabeth, who doesn't really play into this. But yes, there are queens as well as kings in Númenorian history. We are going to talk about Tar-Miriel, but in a little bit. So they begin raising these questions, and they begin sort of challenging the Valar, not openly, but at least saying, well, why can't we go to Valinor? Why do we have to stay here? Why is there this ban? Are you hiding something from us? And word of this gets back to Valinor, and they send messengers to Numenor to sort of smooth things over and explain things. And there's a fantastic bit of dialogue between Tar Atanamir and the messenger from Valinor, where they really get into the nature of men and elves and their place in the world. So I'm going to actually go through this whole bit of dialogue because it's really good. So let us begin here. And they said among themselves, why do the lords of the west sit there in peace unending, while we must die and go we know not whither, leaving our home and all that we have made? And the Eldar die not, even those that rebelled against the lords. And since we have mastered all seas, and no water is so wild or so wide that our ships cannot overcome it, why should we not go to Avalone and greet there our friends? And some there were who said, why should we not go even to Aman and taste there what there were it but for a day the bliss of the powers? Have we not become mighty enough among the people of Arda? And so the Eldar report these to the Valar, and Manwë sends a messenger to Numenor to speak with the king. And this is what the messenger begins with. The doom of the world, one alone can change who made it. And were you so to voyage that, escaping all deceits and snares, you came indeed to Aman, the blessed realm, little would it profit you. For it is not the hand of Manwë that makes its people deathless, but the deathless that dwell therein have hallowed the land. And there you would but wither and grow weary the sooner, as moths in a light too strong and steadfast. But the king said, and does not Eärendil my forefather live? Or is he not in the land of Aman? To which they answered, you know that he has a fate apart, and was a judge to the firstborn who die not. Yet this also is his doom, that he can never return again to mortal lands, whereas you and your people are not of the firstborn, but are mortal men, as Ilúvatar made you. Yet it seems that you desire now to have the good of both kindreds, to sail to Valinor when you will, and to return when you please to your homes. That cannot be, nor can the Valar take away the gifts of Ilúvatar. The Eldar, you say, are unpunished, and even those who rebel do not die. Yet that is to them neither reward nor punishment, but the fulfillment of their being. They cannot escape, and are bound to this world, never to leave it so long as it lasts, for its life is theirs. And you are punished for the rebellion of men, you say, in which you had small part, and so it is that you die. But that was not first appointed for a punishment. Thus you escape and leave the world, and are not bound to it, in hope or in weariness. Which of us, therefore, should envy the others? And the Numenorians answered, Why should we not envy the Valar, or even the least of the deathless? For of us is required a blind trust, and a hope without assurance, knowing not what lies before us in a little while, and yet we also love the earth, and would not lose it. And then the messenger said, Indeed, the mind of Iluvatar concerning you is not known to the Valar, and he has not revealed all things that are to come. But we hold this to be true, that your home is not here, neither in the land of Amun, nor anywhere in the circles of the world, and the doom of men, that they should depart, was at first a gift of Iluvatar. It became a grief to them, only because coming under the shadow of Morgoth, it seemed to them that they were surrounded by a great darkness, of which they were afraid. And some grew willful and proud, and would not yield until life was reft from them. We who bear the ever-mounting burden of the years do not clearly understand this. But if that grief has returned to trouble you, as you say, then we fear that the shadow arises once more and grows again in your hearts. Therefore, though you be the Dunedain, fairest of men who escaped from the shadow of old and fought valiantly against it, we say to you, beware. The will of Eru may not be gainsaid, and the Valar bid you earnestly not to withhold the trust to which you are called, lest soon it become again a bond by which you are constrained. Hope rather that in the end even the least of your desires shall have fruit. The love of Arda was set in your hearts by Iluvatar, and he does not plant to no purpose. Nonetheless, many ages of men unborn may pass ere the purpose is made known, and to you it will be revealed, and not to the Valar. So that's the dialogue between Atanamir and the messenger from Valinor. So there's this very strong lesson in the distinction of men and elves, and how men are kind of resentful of this because they feel that they're being shortchanged and they're being told, just believe. Whereas the elves know exactly what's going to happen to them. They know their lives. They know their fate. And the Valar try to express to them, this is because Iluvatar has a very special purpose for you. Iluvatar has a very special purpose for you. And Eravandi is talking about how this sort of sounds like okay, let me see if I can read this whole thing. It would be especially interesting if Tolkien used other Hebrew influences for the Númenorian culture, because then if you keep going with the similarities, it could be that he meant for the Númenorians to be something like a vague reflection of the Hebrew nation. They were chosen by God, the Valar. He made many mistakes, but still a Christ-like figure, Aragorn, came into the world through them. It's an interesting analogy. I feel like there are certain elements to that could be inferred there. I also feel that we also get a much stronger parallel to the story of Adam and Eve, and the defiance of laws that will ultimately lead to expulsion, but that's kind of spoilery. And Suzanne is saying Tolkien loved culture, mythology, and language, so I wouldn't put it past him, and neither would I. But like I said, there's nothing in there specifically that says that, and I've never been comfortable putting words like that in Tolkien's mouth. It's certainly something that can be inferred, no doubt, but I don't like to say that's definitely what he was doing. So So they have this long discussion, and Tar Autonomir, he listens, and he takes it to heart, but he doesn't change entirely. He clings to his life as long as he possibly can, refuses to yield the scepter to his son until he is old and withered and no longer in charge of his faculties. And this becomes more of a tradition among the kings and queens of Numenor at this point. And I think Suzanne was asking, when I say queen, do I mean ruling queen? And yes, I do. That was a while ago, but yes. When a queen is given the title of Tar, that means she's a ruling queen, not a partner to a king or subservient to a king. So then we reach Tar Autonomir's son, Tar and Kaliman. And it's here. It's here that we start to see a schism develop in Numenor. A greater part of the schism goes to a group that call themselves the King's Men. And the King's Men are loyal to Numenor and more suspicious of the Elves and the Valar and try to keep their distance from him. The other group, that's smaller, are known as the Elendili, or the Elf Friends, and they stay loyal and true to the Elves and to the Valar. And the Elendili also are more direct descendants to Elros than anybody else who becomes a king of Numenor. So, skip forward a little bit further. A couple more generations. This schism gets wider. The rift gets deeper. The differences become stronger. Everybody starts to harden themselves more into their positions, and soon we have a new king named Adonakor, and he is the first king to change the honorific title of Tar, which comes from Elvish, to Ar, which is of the Dunedain language. Undunic, I believe it's called. And so he's the first king to really sort of slap the face of the Elves and the Valar by saying, we're not beholden to you and we're not going to take your honorific anymore. And so he becomes Ar Adunakor. And that's a title that lasts for a pretty long time. Now we're gonna skip down a few more generations. We're gonna skip down a few more generations now to another king named Ar-Gimilzor. I know we got a lot of kings here, and believe me, this is just scratching the surface of what is really part of Numenorean history. Now, Ar-Gimilzor, I believe, is around the 22nd king of Numenor. It says somewhere in here which one he is. I believe he is the 22nd. 23rd king, sorry. Ar-Gimilzor, the 23rd king, was the greatest enemy of the faithful. That's another term that the elf friends go by. They call themselves the faithful. And Gimilzor doesn't trust them. the rift between them has grown so deep at this point that he believes that they're actually working as spies for the elves, or they're working in league with the elves who are spies for the Valar. And so he actually, let's go to the map here. He actually tells them he actually commands them to leave their home, which is in Andunie, which is the port city closest to Valinor, and displaces them all the way to Romena. Suzanne was saying, crap, I was typing and missed it. How did Josh say the title changed from Tar to Ar? Tar is an Elvish honorific for the ruler. Ar is the Andunic honorific for ruler, which is the language of the Númenorians. So they're taking it away from the elves and making it their own. So changing the title from Tar to Ar is really slapping the face of the elves. So now all of the faithful have been displaced to Romena, and Andunie is left as sort of a ruin. Now at this point, and I was never really sure why, but our Gimilzor, and maybe I missed something in the text here. Our Gimilzor, he takes to wife a descendant of the faithful, who is actually now that I think about it, is probably to strengthen his own bloodline, because she is of a direct descent of Elros, and her name is Inzilbeth. And they have a very loveless marriage. And they do have they have 2 children. The eldest son, let me see if I can find it. The names get very weird from here on out. I believe his name is their eldest son is named Inziladun, and their youngest son is named Gimilchad. Now, like I said, Gimilzor and Inzilbeth have a very loveless marriage. They don't really like each other all that much because they do come from such different sides politically. But they still have 2 children, and the 2 children also end up having very disparate political loyalties. The eldest son, Inziladun, is very loyal to the faithful. He believes in reestablishing contact with Valinor and with the elves, whereas the younger son, Gimilchad, really is part of the king's men and wants to distance himself from elves and the Valar as much as he can. It should be noted also at this point that the King's Men have been ruling for so long, and changed the ways of Numenor so much that now when they go to Middle Earth, it's no longer as people giving gifts and great teachers. Now they are, I don't want to say cruel, but they're more overlording. They're more people demanding tribute. And it's through this that they amass a huge amount of wealth and live in a very hedonistic and very extravagant sort of way. Try to imagine the latter years of Rome, when everything is just gaudy and decadent. That's kind of how Numenor is at this point. And so Gimilzor eventually passes, and the scepter goes to the eldest, which is Inziladun, who is somebody who is part of the faithful. And he, Inziladun, brings back the title of Tar, and also gives himself a new name, Tar Palantir, because he is also gifted with a far sight, and he is also gifted with the gift of prophecy. And many people revere him and fear him because he is such a great seer. And one of the big prophecies that he makes, it goes to the tree Nimloth. And he says that the fate of the Númenorians rest with the tree. And Númenorians will die out when Nimloth does. And this is a very important prophecy. And so, but he is a good ruler. He reestablishes the power of the faithful. At this point, elves and the Valar have kind of written off Numenor. They're not really going there too much anymore. Suzanne is saying this is beginning to seem kind of like the back and forth that England had to go through with Catholics and Protestants. That's actually not a bad analogy. And there's something to be said for how much this kind of relates to or is reminiscent of English history with its various lines of kings and queens, and all the various conflicts that happen between them. So here, but again, like I said, I don't like to put words into Tolkien's mouth, but to say that had no influence at all over this would be overstating it, I think. There's definitely shadows of it here. So anyway, Tar Palantir lives a good long life. He actually outlives his younger brother, Gimilcad. And so when Tar Palantir dies, the scepter is passed to his daughter, Tar Miriel. And so now Tar Miriel doesn't stay on the throne very long, because the son of Gimilcad, whose name is Pharazon, does something quite unthinkable. He forces Miriel into marriage with him, which is against Númenorian law because they're too closely related. But somehow, even in spite of that, he's able to do it. And Pharazon is very ambitious. He spent a lot of his time in Middle-earth as something of a warlord. And now he's come back and he's essentially usurping the throne. Because by marrying Miriel, the title of king, the title of ruler passes to him. And he establishes himself as Ar-Pharazon, who is the 25th and last king of Numenor. And he holds on to life very desperately, very ardently. Númenorians have gone through a lot of research and science to try to develop ways to prolong life. All they can really do is perfect embalming techniques. That's about the best they've got. But since he is still a Dunedain, he still lives a very long life. And Pharazon is a very paranoid king. And he's also a very decadent king. He's called Pharazon the Golden. And he he continues to go back to Middle Earth, and he begins hearing about Sauron. Sauron has reestablished Mordor and Barad-dûr, and he's beginning to push out again. And Sauron is being very flagrant about it this time and declaring himself king over men. And Pharazon sees that as a direct challenge to his authority. Suzanne is asking, Pharazon the Golden is like King Midas. Not really, because Midas is more subject to a curse. Pharazon is more just somebody who is a victim of his own hubris. But well, I should say Pharazon isn't punished for it the way that Midas is. Pharazon instead decides to put together an army to assault Middle-earth and to assault Sauron. And because Pharazon believes that he is the one who should be king over men, and so the best way to do it is to attack Sauron and to establish his own dominion over him and make Sauron his slave and make him his subject. And so he marches to Middle-earth with a huge army, marches across to a land called Umbar, and there he calls out Sauron, and Sauron comes, and Sauron surrenders himself. Without any fight, no battle. Sauron just comes to Pharazon and surrenders, and Pharazon, still believing that Sauron has too much power in Middle-earth, says, "You need to come back to Numenor with me as a prisoner." And Sauron Suzanne is saying, "Make Sauron his slave." Okay, Pharazon, let me know how that goes for you. Yeah, pretty much. So Sauron surrenders himself, and he allows himself to become a prisoner. All the while, there's no bloodshed. There are no battles fought. This is completely without a fight. And Pharazon agrees to take Sauron with him back to Numenor. And I believe Admiral Akbar has something to say about a situation like this. So that's where we're going to leave the story today. Sauron is going to go back to Numenor with Pharazon. And we'll see what happens after that. I'm willing to bet things don't turn out quite as good as Pharazon is hoping. Suzanne is saying Sauron elbows his number one guy. Watch this. This is going to be hilarious. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Part of me thinks that he probably did do that at some point. Suzanne is saying, "How can you leave us like that? You're evil." Yes, I am. Well, this was a good stopping point in the story. It's a bit of a cliffhanger. And this is also where the tide really turns in Numenor in ways you're probably not expecting. So yeah. Pharazon is going to take Sauron back with him to Numenor, and everything's going to work out fine, right? Right. Nothing could possibly go wrong in this situation. Suzanne is saying, "Something tells me it's going to get big from here." Oh God, yes, it's going to get big from here. I don't want to talk too much about it because it really is, it's rather shocking. The fall of Numenor, which is what we're going to get into next week. This week has been the rise of Numenor. Next week will be the fall of Numenor. And that's going to take us through the majority of the Second Age. Not the entire Second Age. So the Second Age actually lasts all the way up to the Battle of the Last Alliance, when Isildur cuts the ring from Sauron's hand. And Suzanne is saying, well, you already said Pharazon is the last king of Numenor. Yes, I did. And so this next part is all going to be about him and about the crap that happens. And oh my god. So next week we'll get into that. This week was a little bit more establishing. We had a lot of history to cover. Like I said, I only went over the highlights. Suzanne is asking, I missed the part where the island came up. Could you flash back a quickie explanation for me? Suzanne, are you talking about the island of Numenor? Because that was raised up by the Valar, specifically as a gift to men for their help in the war against Morgoth. And Light of the King is asking how many weeks until we finish. The last episode is going to be on the 27th. We actually only have 2 episodes left. Next week will be the Fall of Numenor. And the week after that, we're going to be dark because it's the Baggins birthday picnic, which I helped to host. But if you're in the LA area, be sure to come by because we are going to have a bit of a discussion about the final chapter of the Silmarillion, which I'm going to pre-record there and then make part of our final Silmarillion episode on the 27th. So that's how that's going to go. And the final episode is actually all about the Ring of Power and the Third Age of Middle Earth. And Suzanne is saying 2 of her students are going to come. Yay! That'll be awesome. Looking forward to that. So yeah, I will see you all next week for the Fall of Numenor, the epic fall of Numenor. Thank you to everybody who was in the chat this week. Eravandi, I Stole the One Ring, Light of the Kings, Suzanne, and Temple. There's another guy in here, Jared Spade, who is kind of silent, but I'm glad you're here. And there you are there, Jared Spade. But I'm glad you were able to make it. So I will see you all next week. We're almost to the end of this. We're in the home stretch of the Silmarillion. It felt like we'd never get here, really. So I will see you all next week. And remember, never stop reading.